Videos of torture keep making their way onto the mainstream part of the internet. These violent videos have mentally scarred millions of innocent internet users. But if you're like us, you can't help but keep looking. Not because you like it, but because you can't believe that humans can really be that violent. And, more importantly, you need to know where they come from. That's why we're here. I'm going to talk you through this infamous Cartel dismemberment video so you don't have to watch it with your own eyes. Trust me, you'll never get those images out of your head. Warning, these descriptions will be too much for some people. The video opens with the victim on his back in the sand, completely naked. They're outside, we know because some desert bushes can be seen on the edges of the video. The whole scene is lit by their car headlights. Around the victim's neck is a metal dog chain, so we all know he has no way to escape. His hands are bound behind his back, but we can't see how they've tied him up. Two men dressed in cartel gear and combat vests are holding the victim's legs spread open. He's pinned to the floor. The perpetrators are armed and ready. One seems to have an AK-47 with him, while the other has some kind of hunting knife. Of course, they would never let you see their faces. All the cartel members are wearing something to cover their face. The torturer is wearing a ski mask. But you can see the face of the victim. He's lean and fairly young, maybe mid-20s or early 30s. His age wouldn't be the first thing you'd noticed if you'd been watching the video. The first thing you would see is how he's sobbing. It looks like he's been badly beaten already. There are a few deep cuts around his face and near his eyes. He's clearly pleading for his life. He knows what's coming. Then, the man with the knife, the torturer, starts speaking. But he's not addressing the man he's holding down. He's talking to the people watching the video. He's saying he sends his regards to the people who keep behaving badly. He names a few people. Then he tells them to look how easy it was for him to capture one of their own. He warns them that they need to up their game. The people he's talking to know the victim's face. But is he a rogue member of this cartel or a member of a rival gang? Surprisingly, even though this doesn't happen in most cartel videos, we will find out later. But it will be a long few minutes before we get there. The torture is about to begin. The man with the gun kicks the victim in the balls to make him shut up. But the man with the knife behaves like he never even noticed his victim pleading for his life. He begins by leaning forward and putting the blade of his 4-inch hunting knife to the man's leg, aiming for the knee. He begins removing the man's leg as he screams. But while most cartel videos look pretty crazy, this looks like it's being done by a professional surgeon. It's a simple cut. The torturer swiftly moves the knife from the back of the knee around to the front. The victim is screaming and squirming to escape, which disturbingly seems to make removing his leg even easier for the man in charge. The torturer twists the leg a little and suddenly bends the knee the wrong way. He then detaches the leg completely, leaving just a horror movie-style fountain of blood. The whole process takes no more than about 30 seconds. This man has clearly done this many times before. The victim is still screaming loudly and struggling, so the torturer uses his own severed leg as a weapon against him. He beats the chained man repeatedly and aggressively over the head with his own leg to get him to shut up. When he finally goes a little more silent, the torturer drops the leg onto the floor next to him. Then, he steps up to the other leg. He grabs the leg from the other cartel member and begins mocking his victim, saying he thought he was tough. There's a little exchange, and the torturer eventually dedicates this next move to another member of the victim's gang. Then, he repeats the process from before. As the victim screams, the torturer runs his knife from the back of the knee to the front, then begins twisting and wrenching the leg off. This time, he completes the removal even faster. It takes maybe 15 seconds. As he makes the final move, the other man leans to the side and stands on the victim's chest to keep him still. The torturer now has another severed leg in his hands. The victim isn't struggling as much this time. These cartel videos sometimes feature evidence that the victim has been pumped with some kind of drug to keep them alive through the torture. For a normal person, shock and blood loss would have knocked them out long ago. But even full of drugs, this man can't stay alive forever. Either he's lost too much blood or he's resigned himself to his fate now. But just because he's not as loud, that doesn't mean they're going to go easy on him. The torturer hands the severed leg to a new man who steps in front of the camera. Now, this man begins beating the victim over the head with his own leg, the same as the first time. They taunt the victim some more, then the torturer starts again. This time, he's removing the victim's arm at the shoulder. Despite calming down, it's clear that their victim is still conscious while this is happening. They flip the victim onto his stomach, and the torturer runs his knife through the man's shoulder. Now, he begins screaming again. Of course, this does nothing to stop them. Each time the blade is moved, a huge gaping wound is left behind. Now the torturer rolls his victim onto his side and makes more horrific deep cuts to the front of the man's shoulder. You can tell just how much blood this man has lost because even though the cuts are leaving wide open wounds, there's nowhere near as much blood as there was when his legs were removed. Now, the torturer is bending the victim's arm right back into a disturbing and unnatural position. The camera moves away from the arm now, showing the man's whole mutilated body. It zooms in on his red, cut legs, which are pulled up near his torso. It comes in close to his terrified eyes. It comes in close on the blood-soaked dirt cake to his body. He screams, and the camera returns to his torso and the huge wound where his arm used to be. The torturer grabs the man's last limb. He pulls it out from underneath the victim toward his back. He makes a cut from the armpit to the shoulder around the back. Another man steps up, rolls the victim so he's lying on his stomach, then steps on his back to help the torturer do his work. The man continues to cut deep into the victim's flesh over and over, creating a deep wound in his armpit. Here, the video cuts, but it doesn't end. There's no doubt you've been wondering what this man could have done to deserve this treatment. Who are these violent torturers? Now, we get an answer. The video has cut to another shot of the victim we've been watching get murdered, but now he's not being tortured. This video must have been taken before the torture started. He looks pretty healthy still. He probably hasn't been beaten yet, and if he has, it wasn't severe. He's on a concrete floor inside a building. The metal dog leash is already around his neck, making sure he can't leave. And he's giving us all the answers we could have asked for. In Spanish, he explains that he's denouncing the Los Viagras. He's saying he can see now that the CJNG is the best. So clearly, this victim was tortured for being a rival of the CJNG, a member of Los Viagras. He's sure not the first person to be tortured for this. This is just what happens if you cross the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, better known as CJNG. This notoriously violent cartel formed after a fracturing of one of the most famous cartels of all time, the Sinaloa. In 2009, they made themselves known by beginning to post videos like this online, and they've been doing it ever since. But it wouldn't be their most violent stunt. One September afternoon in 2011, several vehicles stopped traffic in a weirdly coordinated way on a major Veracruz road. Once all cars were stopped, armed men climbed out of two trucks. They pointed their guns at the drivers who were unable to escape the traffic jam. As the shocked drivers watched and filmed on their phones, some men opened the backs of the trucks. The drivers were horrified. They were stacked with tortured corpses that were now being thrown onto the open road in front of everyone. There were 35 murder victims. Most had been visibly tortured. Others still had their hands tied together. All these victims were now lying out in the open on the highway in the sun. The armed men ran off, leaving the trucks behind. There was only a written note as an explanation. It said the bodies were people who'd been murdered by a group that opposed extortion and the murder of innocent people. It also featured a threat to anyone that offered help to the Los Zetas cartel. CJNG later claimed responsibility for the horrific incident. Even though the note left at the scene said they were against the murder of innocents, police discovered that all the men dumped out of the trucks that day were ordinary civilians with no criminal ties. That was just the start of a regional massacre that left thousands dead in the wake of CJNG. They are known as one of the most violent cartels in operation, and they're only gaining more power. They have drug contacts all over the world and are earning an estimated $12.7 billion from these sales. In other words, these kinds of murders are far from over. It's likely these torture videos will keep appearing online unless CJNG completely wipes out all other cartels. But that's not happening anytime soon. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and before you leave, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Criminal Corner so you don't miss the next ones.